Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I did not plan to spend the winter inside a power plant. I came in on a Friday for an operations review, walked Liam through the visitor safety briefing, and expected to be home by evening with a pot of chili going and the space heater humming in the garage. By Saturday night, the grid was shedding load, the sky had turned white, and the radio carried the same clipped message from dispatch every 10 minutes until it stopped entirely. After that, all we had was the steady tone of our control room alarms, the hum of emergency systems, and the wind beating the catwalks that climb the bluff over Lake Michigan. My name is Dale Mercer. I supervise a small team of engineers and technicians at the Consumers Energy Pumped Storage Plant outside Ludington, Michigan. The site looks like a stadium built into a lakeside hill. Except the bowl on top is a reservoir with enough water to run 6 generating units rated in the hundreds of megawatts each. On a normal winter day, we pump water up from the lake when power is cheap and let it fall through the turbines when demand rises. It is a giant battery made of earth, concrete, and steel penstocks as wide as city buses. Our control room sits mid-slope in a reinforced section, with glass that faces the lake and a wall of monitors that track everything: reservoir elevation, head pressure, wicket gate position, generator temperatures, intake debris screens, diesel levels, and grid frequency. We train for equipment failures, ice storms, and security incidents. We do not train for what we faced that week. The outbreak had been a whisper for days. Rumors at first, then phone pushes from the county that did not say much beyond shelter, avoid contact, medical services are delayed. I kept the team focused, confirm the units in spinning reserve, log the pump starts, inspect the diesel heaters, check the automatic transfer switches feeding the control room, verify station batteries were at float. The plant is designed to be robust. If the grid trips, we can black start part of the site, keep the reservoir instrumentation live, and run a skeleton crew with the emergency diesel generator that sits in a room as clean as a hospital. Its crankcase heaters keeping the oil warm and ready. By Saturday, mid-morning, the snow began. Fine at first, then thick enough to erase the lake horizon. Wind drove it sideways across the parking lot, where my truck would later disappear under a drift that hardened like poured concrete. The security feed showed empty county roads, and the service gate swinging on its hinges until Tyrell Hawkins, Ty to everyone, walked out into it with a pry bar and chained it shut. Ty had worked security at the plant since he left the National Guard. He carried a Smith Wesson M and P.40 on his belt, and a radio clipped high so he could hear over the wind. He did not talk much. He checked doors, Idaho D the few contractors still on site, and signed them out when they left mid-storm with tires spinning on the hill. At noon, I got a call from Liam. He had left campus early for winter break and decided to drive up to see me. He was 19, smart, stubborn, and convinced that highways were still open if you were patient. "I'm already in Mason County," he said. "Traffic's light." I told him to turn around. He laughed. An hour later, he parked at the lower lot with the snow past his bumper. Ty met him at the gate, made him sign the visitor log, handed him a hard hat and safety glasses right there in the guard shack, as if the rules could keep the rest of the world out. We were 5 inside by dusk. Carla Nguyen had been on a scheduled maintenance day when the storm advanced. She could rebuild a pump seal with her gloves on and a flashlight between her teeth, and she had the calm, slightly amused way of speaking that made people stand straighter. The last to arrive was Marina Havel, a local meteorologist whose hatchback stalled in a drift on the access road. Ty brought her in wrapped in a wool blanket from his patrol truck. She had maps, barometer notes in a spiral notebook, and a low voice that made forecasts sound like instructions. The radio said the county was closing everything. Then it said nothing at all. I called the control center to report our posture. 1 unit in spinning reserve, 2 pumps on standby, diesel tested, reserve reservoir elevation stable at winter levels. The operator on the other end kept asking if we had seen anything unusual. I said only the storm. There was a pause. "Affirm," he said. "We have irregular activity at sites statewide. Maintain site security. Do not open to the public without authorization." His voice had the rasp of someone who had not slept. I asked if he meant looters. Another pause. "Maintain site security," he repeated, and the line dropped. 10 minutes later, his number went to a fast, busy tone. By evening, the grid frequency stabilized at a value that was not normal. I took a snapshot of the SCADA trend and saved it. Habit more than hope. I asked Liam to sit, drink water, and not touch anything. He nodded and wiped the fog from the observation glass with his sleeve so he could look at the lake. It was a gray wall and nothing else. Ty locked the building down. We are built like a ship. Fire doors section off corridors. Stairwells are narrow and staggered. The exterior doors are steel, heavy, and alarmed. Ty walked each one, checked the strike plates, and looked at the seals at the threshold to make sure the snow had not packed them. On the camera monitors, the strains of the storm looked like static. The cameras that faced the lake froze into whiteness, then showed faint motion when Gus cleared them for a moment. We ate what was in the break room. Energy bars, oatmeal packets, 2 cans of soup without labels that we opened carefully. I sent Carla down to the auxiliary room to test the diesel again and start the room heaters that keep moisture off electronics. She came back with a penciled checklist and a thumbs up. Marina unfolded her maps on the steel table and traced the isobars. "This trough will deepen overnight," she said, "and the lake effect will keep feeding snow bands. Temperature by morning, negative double digits. That will slow anyone outside. It will also slow us." "What do you mean, anyone outside?" Liam asked. She tapped the radio. "You heard it, and I heard something else. The county warned people not to approach the infected. There was no follow-up. That isn't how they talk unless something has gone very wrong." We slept in the bunk room for contractors. The beds lined up tight and the air dry enough to crack skin at the knuckles. The HVAC system ran at minimum to conserve diesel. The CO monitors were green. The red exit signs glowed steady. I set the generator in auto mode and reset the alarms that weren't critical. The wind used the catwalks as a set of pipes, finding every hole to whistle and groan. Around 1 in the morning, the grid tie dropped and the control room lights did the half-second blink that is still long enough to hold your breath. The diesel spun up and caught. The tone in the control room changed from a low hum to a deeper, steadier note. We were on our own. In the morning, the cameras showed the lake like sheet metal, wind-scored and opaque. Snow had drifted against the intake fencing. We keep a debris screen at the lake interface to stop logs and ice chunks from entering the tunnel mouths. When the waves throw ice into the screens, we hear it as a distant, irregular thump in the intake gallery, a note under the main plant frequencies. I heard it then, soft at first, then sharper. It should have been ice. It was not. The rhythm was wrong. It was not the slap of drift either. It was persistent. Slow, then fast, then gone. I logged it as intake noises inconsistent with ice action, because that was the only language I had at 8 in the morning on a storm day with a grid collapse and an unspoken instruction to keep the doors closed. Ty brought in more blankets from the security office. He handed Liam a radio and showed him how to press the side button only when he was speaking. "Don't play with it," he said. "You touch the emergency key and this desk lights up like a holiday tree." Liam nodded again and turned it over, fascinated by the belt clip as if it were a part he could learn by feel. The second day, we moved to a routine. Carla and I ran equipment checks in pairs. Ty walked the perimeter and the interior doors. Marina updated her storm tracks. Liam helped me write a ration plan. The plant has emergency meals sealed in tough plastic, designed for crews that get trapped in storms. They are high-calorie, compact, and as dry as chalk. We split them into day bags. Water was not a problem yet. We could melt snow and boil it. We had spare reverse osmosis cartridges for the sink in the shop, and we could draw clean water from the reservoir side if we had to. Heat was the limiting factor. The diesel feeds a jacket water loop and building heat exchangers. When it runs, we stay above freezing. When it does not, our breath shows in the control room and pipes freeze in odd places you do not expect until they burst. Late that afternoon, the intake noises came back, louder. I muted the HVAC fans for 10 seconds to isolate it. The room fell quiet. The thumps and scrapes came through the structure, not through the air. They were under our feet, in the concrete and steel. Ty was standing by the door and watched me tilt my head like I did when a bearing ran hot. "What is it?" he asked. "Not ice," I said. "It sounds like things hitting the screen on purpose." "They don't hit things on purpose," he said. "That is what I told myself." Marina put 2 fingers against the table, feeling the vibration. "It is not consistent with wave period," she said. "It is too regular for wind-driven debris. Also, the storm has eased. There's no wave energy to send that kind of load into the screen." We didn't say what we thought. We did what the procedure tells us. Reduce operations that draw water, maintain gates closed, limit unit starts that might pull a negative pressure wave into the intake tunnel and make the screen flex. I called down to the gallery where the tunnel bends toward the lake and asked Carla to put her ear to the steel. She did and was quiet for a full minute. "There's movement inside the intake," she said. "I can feel impacts through the framework. Something is climbing the screen from the lakeside, or trying to." "People?" Liam asked before I could mute the speaker. Ty looked at him. "No," he said. "No way." We lost the radio check with the county. The weather service bulletin stopped in the early morning. Marina said the transmitter was probably without power. By evening, the sky cleared and the temperature dropped hard. The lake smoked, steam rising from gaps where water stayed open, but most of the nearshore had gone to a solid, wind-polished sheet. The world was white and silver. We pulled on our winter gear, insulated coveralls, high-grip boots with microspikes, balaclavas, and stepped onto the roof access to look west. The town was a line of dark shapes with no lights. The lighthouse up the coast was a darker spike against the sky. The only color came from a thin belt of pink at the horizon that went gray as soon as it appeared. I could hear the cattle guard at the gate rattle in the wind. Nothing else moved except a few specks on the ice. I raised my binoculars. The specks were figures. They moved with a stiff, deliberate gait. They stopped and swayed, then moved again with a kind of reset, as if their joints had to be reminded how to work in the cold. They were coming from the south, from the beach access, and they did not seem to feel the wind at all. We backed into the stairwell. Ty turned the panic bar and let the door close slowly to keep the seal from slamming. "We keep doors locked," he said. "We keep noise down. We run low light at night. We watch the cameras." He looked at me not for permission but to confirm he could speak for the site. I nodded. He had the tone I hear in people who've been in emergency operations before. It is not louder. It is flatter, narrower, like a rope you can hold. We made a plan for the next 3 days. Objective 1. Maintain heat and critical systems with minimal diesel use. Objective 2. Conserve food. Supplement with anything in the warehouse that is still safe and not expired. Objective 3. Confirm the integrity of the intake screen and tunnel gates. The last one meant a visit to the sublevels. The access down to the intake gallery is a set of steel stairs that drop in landings, then a horizontal corridor, then another set of stairs. You are always aware of the thickness of concrete around you in those spaces. When you speak, you hear yourself twice. The gallery itself is a long room with the face of the lake at one end, hidden behind steel, and the mouths of the penstock set like huge openings along the wall. In winter, the room keeps a damp chill that gets into your sleeves no matter the insulation. We brought headlamps, radios, and a rolling cart with tools. Carla kept the cart neat, each wrench laid out the same way every time, so she did not have to hunt in bad light. At the far end of the gallery is a chamber where the intake screen can be inspected from the inside. There is a service catwalk and an inspection hatch. We cannot open the hatch when the lake is angry, but we can put sensors against the structure and pick up vibration signatures. Carla had a contact microphone from her own kit. She pressed it to the steel frame and listened through headphones connected to a small handheld monitor that showed frequency bands as bars. The screen vibrated at high frequency when water pushed through. Now there was a different band, lower in bursts, followed by scraping in short runs. I watched her face. She did not flinch, but she reached for a grease pencil and wrote times on concrete sill with short, blocky numbers. After 5 minutes, she tapped the headset and looked at me. "These are impacts at intervals too regular for random debris," she said. "Something is grabbing and releasing the mesh, and there are multiple sources, different timing. Could be trapped material shifting in the cold," I said. "Could be," she said, and did not bother to hide that she did not believe it. We returned to the control room and updated the whiteboard with the diesel remaining, runtime, and test intervals. Liam asked if he could help with something more than counting meal packs. I told him to sit with Marina and learn the wind chill table and frostbite risk chart and then explain it back to me. He came over 10 minutes later and gave me the numbers in a steady voice. It is a simple table, but I watched the way he spoke. No jokes, no fidgets. He understood that the numbers were not academic. At -20 with wind, your skin freezes in minutes. If you make a mistake outside, you do not fix it quickly. That night, the camera that faces the lake intake saw shapes on the ice at the edge of the intake zone. The ice there is thin because warmer water from the station keeps it from thickening evenly. The shapes moved to the edge and stopped. One slid forward and broke through up to the waist. It did not react the way an uninjured person does when they hit water that cold. It did not thrash. It did not try to find the ice edge with its hands. It climbed with slow, methodical motions and then stood again. It joined the others at the fence. They started to push against the mesh in a steady, grinding way. Their hands and clothing showed hard with frost, but they did not stop. The impacts transmitted into the gallery as a low thump felt through steel. I marked each one on the board until the line of marks looked like stitches. We kept the lights low and ran the control room from the glow of the monitors. The room was warm compared to the gallery, but dry enough to make the skin on my knuckles split. Ty taped the cracks closed like a field medic, quick and neat. "You don't need to look tough for anybody," he said, and put a small tube of ointment next to the keyboard like a joke we both pretended to enjoy. The third day, we got a voice on the radio. It was faint, full of static, and too clipped for comfort, the way people talk when they are trying not to be heard by something else in the room. "Luddington site, this is district operations," the voice said. "Report." I keyed the mic. "Luddington reporting. 5 personnel on site, diesel operating. Grid tie lost, intakes occupied by unknown subjects. We are secure." The static ate part of the response, then, "District acknowledges. Keep gates sealed. Do not allow entry. Infection spreads by contact. Persons exhibit lack of response to cold. Avoid close combat. Use barriers. Repeat, avoid close combat. The line died as if a switch had opened. Liam was looking at me with a question. I shook my head. We did not say the words. We did not give them a place in the room. We already knew what they meant. By the fourth day, the diesel day tank was down to a level that made the low-level sensors start to think about a warning. We had fuel in the bulk tank outside, but I was not going to run the transfer pump with the storm gasping like a tired thing and unknown bodies on the ice. We made it a priority for daylight when the cold was at its worst, and anything outside would be slow. We dressed in layers and face protection and checked each other's zippers and straps. Ty took the lead with his sidearm holstered under his jacket and a collapsible baton in his hand. And Carla carried the keys and a lockout, tagout kit. I carried the tool bag and the list of valve positions in my head the way you carry a familiar street map. The fuel transfer station sits on the lee side of the building in a recessed bay with steel bollards. The hoses are heavy and stiff when cold. The pump is enclosed and self-priming but touchy when the line has sat. We cleared the snow around the cabinet, checked the pressure gauge, and bled air at the highest point. Carla opened the suction valve at the bulk tank and then cracked the discharge at the day tank to ensure flow. I held the line with my gloved hands while she thumbed the starter. The motor turned slowly, then caught and settled at a pitch that always makes me less tense by half. We moved fuel in 5-minute pulses to keep from overheating anything. The meter clicked in cold, deliberate units. We watched the security cameras on our portable tablet as much as we watched the gauge. The ice was empty for 50 yards. Past that, the figures stood in a spaced line like fence posts, facing us in a way that made my hair tighten under the hat. They did not move toward us, but they did not turn away either. We topped the day tank and shut down tight. Back inside, I wrote the levels on the whiteboard and circled them. We had enough for 2 weeks if we kept the load light and shut down non-essential heat. That meant the back stairwell would fall to near freezing, and the equipment corridor would be a place you moved through quickly. We set up poly sheeting and tape to create vestibules and used foam to block airflow under doors. It made the plant feel like a patchwork of tents inside a building that had always felt like a single machine. Ty posted a schedule for patrols. Carla added a maintenance rotation. Marina wrote a weather briefing with bullet points and a simple forecast. More cold, less wind, clear nights that would help the lake freeze solid to the horizon. That night, the intake noises stopped. The camera showed a clear field of ice, smooth, no figures, no motion by the fence. It should have been a relief. It did not feel like one. The next morning we learned why. The noise had moved. We have sump pumps in the lowest corridors where groundwater seeps through the hill. They kick on every hour for a minute and make a polite cough, the sound of a machine doing its job. At 9 in the morning, the pump ran and then kept running because something blocked its discharge. The alarm panel in the control room tripped with a yellow telling light. I acknowledged it and sent Carla with Liam to clear the discharge line at the cleanout near the shaft. They were gone 10 minutes when I heard the radio click twice. That was Ty's signal from his patrol that he needed me to stop and listen. Then Carla's voice came on, very calm and much lower than usual. "We have movement in the lower corridor," she said. "We have ice melt coming through a seam at the intake gate. Not much water, but there are fingers through the gap." I moved before she finished. Ty and I met at the equipment cage and took the long stairs 2 at a time, my breath hot in my mask. We hit the corridor and felt the temperature change like a tide as we crossed from a heated section to a cold one. At the far end, a service gate meant to isolate the intake tunnel had a gap at the bottom where its seal met the floor. The gap was a finger's width, nothing a person could use, nothing I had ever worried about beyond heat loss. Through it came a thin trickle of meltwater, and through it, pressed against the floor, were fingers that looked gray under the LED work lights. The fingers flexed, sought purchase, flattened, and went still. Then they tried again. They did not wither in the cold water. They did not retreat from pressure when a hinge squealed. They simply kept pressing as if told to do a task, and they obeyed. Ty breathed out. "We need to increase gate pressure," he said. "We need to seal that gap. We can raise the gate a quarter inch to clear debris, then lower it with more force," I said. "The actuators can handle the extra compression for a short period." "Do it," he said. He did not shout. He stood so he could watch the corridor in both directions and then looked at Liam without moving his head. "You stay back by the corner," he said. "You don't come forward unless I tell you to." "I can help," Liam said. "You are helping by not being in the way," Ty said. And then, after a beat, "Good eyes back there. Tell me if anything moves." I called the control room and told Marina to stand by at the gate control panel. She read back the steps, her voice precise. "Increase pressure set point by 10%. Raise gate to clear. Lower to new set point. Watch for overload. Ready." I gave the word. The corridor around us hummed as the actuator took up load. The fingers at the bottom of the gate flattened and then withdrew by the width of a fingernail, then returned. The flow stopped, then returned as frost melted at the edge. The gate thumped once against its sill in a way I did not like. The overload light flickered on the local panel and went out. "Hold pressure," I said into the radio. "Do not exceed red band." The trickle slowed to a wet sheen. The fingers kept pressing and sliding as if trying to find a way to become thinner than they were. We built a seal in front of the gate with materials meant for other purposes. Carla directed it like a choreography. Sandbags from the flood kit, butyl rubber sheets, a pallet wedged as a brace, and expanding foam where steel met concrete. It was not pretty, but it set. We stood and watched the seam for 10 minutes without speaking. The fingers pressed once and then disappeared. The water dried to a clean line. Back in the control room, I updated the board. I wrote, "Gate B sealed, temporary." Carla wrote, "Inspect actuator mounts next shift." Ty wrote, "No open access to lower corridor alone." Liam stood behind us and watched our handwriting make a plan out of fear. Then he took the marker and wrote, "We can do this if we follow procedure." He underlined procedure twice. I let it stand. We slept in shifts. Ty walked to the interior at odd hours. He did not try to be quiet, and it helped to hear his steps moving in predictable patterns. At 2 a.m, the camera at the roof stairwell picked up motion below the lens. A figure moved along the base of the building on the lakeside. It kept its hands against the wall as if it were learning how to use them. It had a jacket that had frozen into a stiff shell. The hood was up, and the face was a smear of frost. It moved to the intake fence and stood there. Another shape followed and stood next to it, then another. They formed a line. They did not look up at the camera. They did not talk or gesture. They pressed and then stepped back, then pressed again. The fence flexed half an inch and held. By dawn, the wind had calmed, and the sky was clear as glass. Marina said we had a window before the next trough. "The lake will freeze farther out today," she said, "but the near shore will move with the current under the ice. Pressure ridges will form. We should not be near the intake if that happens." I looked at the gate seal we had built on the board and felt the clock behind it. We could not rely on a temporary fix. If the intake tunnel built up ice load and then released it, the flex could shear our seal. We needed a better solution, and we needed to check the lower pumps that kept the sumps from rising. "Assign me to the lower corridor," Carla said before I could ask. "Bring Liam with me. He can carry and hand tools. We'll go slow." Ty looked at me. I looked at him. Marina cleared her throat. "Coldest hours are safest," she said. "Whatever is outside is slower now. The lower levels will warm as the day goes on. If you go, go now." We dressed in layers, added harnesses and clipped lines to fixed points so if we slipped we did not take the whole flight of stairs in one motion. We carried radios and 2 intrinsically safe flashlights. Ty carried the baton and a fire extinguisher rated for everything because powder stops many things that want to move toward you. He also carried a crowbar because steel that length speaks a universal language even when you do not want to use it. The lower corridor smelled like cold concrete and oil from decades of work that no solvent can erase. Our breath made fine fog that lit in our lamps like dust. The gate seal looked as we left it. The sump pump panel showed fault cleared after our pressure adjustment. We opened the hatch and checked the impeller for debris. It was clean. We closed and relatched it, and I made Liam read the pressure on the discharge without touching the gauge body with his glove. He read it right and did not smile. That was when the first sound came, not at the gate but from the penstock mouth for Unit 3. A long, hollow vibration like someone dragging a metal chain along the inside of a drum. We froze. The penstock mouths are covered by heavy steel grills and upstream wicket gates. They are not easy to reach from the intake side in winter because of ice, but something had gotten near enough to transmit a vibration. The sound stopped. Then 3 shorter knocks came in a pattern that would have made me think of a person who wanted attention if I had let myself. I did not. I raised the radio. "Control, this is lower corridor," I said. "Possible contact on Unit 3 intake. Please confirm gate positions and no pressure differentials." Marina read back the positions in her careful voice. "All wicket gates closed. Head pressure equalized, no flow." She paused. "We have camera movement on the lake ice at the Unit 3 intake zone, shapes moving under a thin crust." "Copy," I said. "We are holding position." We held for a long minute that I counted by my heartbeat because I had nothing else to count by. The knocks did not return. We backed out of the corridor and sealed it as we went. On the stair landing, Liam put one hand on the rail and looked at me. "I'm okay," he said before I asked. He was pale under the balaclava, but his voice did not shake. "I'm okay," he said again. I nodded. "You are," I said. I meant it in more ways than one. We spent the afternoon on radio checks across the plant, verifying that every vestibule and door was set. Ty showed Liam how to use the magstripe override on interior doors in case the power flickered. We put glow tape at foot level in the long corridor so you could navigate without light if you had to. Carla staged tools for quick operations. A cart with the right wrenches, a bucket with sealant, a battery pack on charge. She labeled everything in bold letters large enough to read when tired. That alone made the plant feel more defensible. At night, the sky over the lake turned clear enough to show stars so sharp it felt like you could hear them. Marina came up to the roof with us and named constellations I had not thought about since grade school. In the far distance to the west, there was a faint smudge of light on the horizon, too steady to be a plane and too high to be a low town. "Reflection," she said. "Or an opening in the cloud over Wisconsin. Hard to tell." Liam tracked it with binoculars. "It moved," he said, or my hand shook. We watched it until it faded. The 5th day began with a brittle calm that did not feel friendly. The diesel generator ran without complaint, but everything attached to it sounded an edge higher than usual, as if the cold had pulled pitch out of steel. At 11, an alarm that I do not often hear tripped and then cleared. Intake differential pressure spike. It happens when wind or waves push ice against the screen, or when something blocks part of the opening. It triggers an inspection. we had just inspected. I acknowledged and looked at the trend. The spike had a shape to it that was not like wave action. It had a ramp up and then a sawtooth drop, as if several points of pressure hit at once and then one by one released. "Gate B?" I asked. "All gates closed," Marina said. "No change to pressure set points since last adjustment. All unit breaker statuses unchanged." "Copy." The next alarm we couldn't ignore. Lower corridor water level rising. Not a flood. A slow, steady climb. I looked at the board. We had sealed the gate seam. The sumps were clear. The water had to be coming from somewhere else. That left us with a list of places I did not want to visit but could not avoid. The turbine pit drains. The draft tube inspection hatches. The small, forgotten weep holes that always drip and never matter until they do. "We divide," I said. "Short distances between teams. Radios open. No closed doors between us if we can avoid it." Ty shook his head. "We don't divide where we can be grabbed. We go as a unit. We clear one area at a time." He had the final say on security, and I let him have it. We moved together, a slow-moving knot of winter gear and tools and a baton. Liam stayed in the middle and held the light. At the Unit 2 draft tube, we found the source. Frost had settled around a seam that always wept. In the deep cold, it had pulled back and opened a hairline path. It should not have been enough to show as a rise on the panel, but it did because somewhere downstream, the water had another exit. We followed the shine along the floor to a cracked expansion joint at the edge of a slab and knelt. A faint draft came from below, warmer than the corridor. That meant air movement. That meant a path to the intake somewhere we had not planned for. The plant is old and large and has nooks designed by people who were careful but also human. I knew with a sinking clarity that we were seeing a path someone had not envisioned when the drawings were inked. "We need foam and a plate," Carla said. "We wedge it, seal it, and we monitor. If pressure builds, we release it slowly." I agreed. We set the plate and injected foam until it pushed back at the edges. We kept our hands well away from the joint. There's a right amount of curiosity when you work around water and steel. Too much, and you learn things you cannot unlearn. We finished with a line of sandbags for weight and walked back. The panel stopped showing a rise 10 minutes later. In the control room, we ate a careful lunch of crackers, peanut butter, and one of the unlabeled soups that turned out to be good enough to make Liam smile. For 5 minutes, we let the warmth and the salty taste make us normal. Then the roof camera called us back. Figures on the ice again. Not a crowd, not a rush, but steady. They moved from the south, stopped at the intake fence, and then did something new. They began to lie down on the ice in a row and push with their feet while holding the bottom of the fence with their hands, like workers trying to slide a heavy object. The fence supports flexed, the posts held. The mesh bowed in a clean curve. The ice beneath them cracked and refroze in seconds, a glaze forming and breaking. "Why would they do that?" Liam asked. "They do not decide," Ty said. "They repeat what worked once. If one of them got through somewhere by pushing, they will all push until they forget why they began." Carla squinted at the screen. "We need to decouple our presence from their incentive," she said. "If they hear us when we run the diesel, or feel warmth through the walls, they will keep trying at the points where those signals are strongest. We should move heat inside away from the lake wall and turn off blowers that vent in that direction." I looked at the HVAC layout. "We can redirect some flows," I said. "We can heat the back corridor more and allow the lake wall to run colder, but if we go too far, we risk freezing fire lines." "Small changes," she said. "We made them." Over the next hours, the camera showed the line at the fence thin and then reform as if they took turns. They did not leave. The lack of fatigue was the unnatural part. You come to expect people to stop. You wait for an end to effort. When effort has no rational end point, your planning must become the end point. That is exhausting in its own way. On the 7th day, with the diesel at half and our nerves in spirals, the thing we knew would happen finally did. The lake ice heaved under the intake zone in slow motion. A pressure ridge formed along the fence line like a blade rising from under the water. The fence flexed up, then slapped back. The camera glitched twice from vibration. The intake differential alarm went red and did not clear. The gate seam we had sealed held, then began to hiss, then began to weep. I ran. Everyone ran. At the lower corridor, the sound was a dull, steady roar we had not heard before, like wind in a cave. The gate seal we built was intact but wet. The sandbag shifted. The foam groaned. We added weight. Carla pushed a brace into position and I saw her hands shake for the first time. "I need more," she said. Ty pointed with the baton. "There." The pallet we had used as a proof brace became part of the wall. Liam slid it into place. His face in the headlamp beam was a mask of focus, his jaw clenched. The hiss behind the gate stepped up to a thin high tone and then back down, as if something on the other side had changed. The water stopped. It did not return. We stood there in a line, hands on the seal like we were holding it with our bodies. Ty listened with his head tilted and then straightened. "We cannot do this every day," he said. "We cannot win a long fight in a tunnel." "You are saying what we all know," Marina said in my ear over the radio. "I have a new piece of information. The air is crystal clear. The temperature is going to hold below zero for another 48 hours. After that, we will see a warm push from the south. The ice will move. The pressure on these structures will change in ways we cannot predict. If you are going to make a decision that involves the lake surface, your window is now. We are trained to avoid rash decisions. You wait for data. You build redundancy. You put caution tape around the parts of your mind that want to jump. But energy is not infinite. Diesel is not infinite. Cold is not a wall that holds forever." We went to the roof and looked west again. The horizon over Wisconsin was hazed by ice crystals. To the north, the shoreline curved like a drawn bow. To the south, the lighthouse stood without light. At the far edge of the lake, a faint smudge blinked twice, as if mirrors had caught the sun. Marina held the binoculars for a long time. "That is not a star," she said. "That is a light source moving or being blocked in a regular way. It is far, but not imaginary." Ty asked the question with no ceremony. "If we leave, do we have enough fuel for the snowmobiles to get us to open water or to a shore where there are people?" "We have 2 snowmobiles in the equipment shed for winter patrols," I said. "We have fuel for both for a day of travel, more if we tow from the start and take turns riding. The lake surface will allow speed. The weak points will be pressure ridges and leads. We will use safety lines. We will keep distance between machines." "We will not go as a single file," Ty said. "We will stagger, so if one machine goes through, the other can assist. We will carry line launchers and flares. We will keep the load light." "Light means leaving things behind," Liam said. His voice cracked once and then smoothed. "I can carry tools." "You will carry what the team needs," Ty said, and nodded to show it was not a reprimand. We made the list like a mission plan. Personal gear, insulated layers, dry socks, hand warmers, goggles, helmets, headlamps, radios and chest pockets under the outer layer to keep batteries warm. Safety gear, throw bags with floating line, harnesses, carabiners, ice screws, small anchors to bite into pressure ridges, compact thermal blankets, a compact first aid kit with splints and a small set of oral rehydration salts. navigation, paper map in plastic, compass, handheld GPS with extra batteries warmed in inside pockets, whistle for signals if radios failed. Signaling, flares for day-night, reflective panel, tools, a small handsaw for cutting slots in thin ridges, a short spud bar for testing ice thickness, a folding shovel for trenches if we had to camp, food and water, high-calorie bars, nuts, jerky that we chewed without looking at the label, metal bottles we could warm with a stove. Heat, one small white gas stove that would run in the cold and a spare pump, 2 small fuel bottles. Protection, Ty's sidearm with spare magazines, stored safely as a last resort to stop something at close range if a barrier failed. We did not dwell on it. We just wrote it down under the other items because order matters when fear is large. We staged on the roof because the stairwell opened to a platform wide enough to lay out gear and start engines without exhaust soaking a closed space. The snowmobiles were older but maintained. We kept them for storm checks on the roof and for perimeter runs when the roads were not plowed. Carla checked the drive belts and track tension. I siphoned fuel from the transfer station into approved cans with a hand pump because I did not want to run anything electric near vapors. Liam loaded the sleds with care, balancing weight left to right so the machines would track true. Marina wrapped our maps and wrote across the top in thick marker the wind direction, expected temperature curve, and a note to herself that read, "Do not guess. Measure." Then she handed the maps to me and tapped them with 2 fingers. "Do not guess," she said aloud. We did the last pass through the plant as if we were leaving a ship. We shut non-critical panels. We closed valves and left tags. We locked the interior doors, but left keys in boxes that anyone from our utility would find and know. In the control room, I took one of the emergency radios, set it to transmit a repeating message every hour, and recorded a clear line that said, "This is Consumers Energy Loadington Pumped Storage Plant. Facility secured. 5 survivors departing over lake ice. If you receive this, leave a note on the main entrance whiteboard with your time and direction of travel. Conserve fuel. Avoid the intake zone." I left the message running. If the diesel died, it would stop. If someone arrived before that, they would hear it. We stood at the roof door in our gear and looked at each other. I looked at Liam, and all at once he was 5, standing on a sled at the top of a small hill while I told him to keep his hands inside and lean with the curve. He was 19 now and leaning into a curve that I could not see the end of. I put my gloved hand on his shoulder and squeezed once. "You are a member of the team," I said. "If you are unsure, ask. If you are cold, say so. If you need a break, tell me. No hero moves. We move together." He nodded. "We move together," he said. We opened the door. The cold hit us across the eyes like a physical thing. We started the machines and let them warm. Engines do not like to be asked for work before oil moves, and this was not a day to break a belt on the first grade. Ty took point. Carla took rear. I rode with Liam on the second machine. Marina rode with Ty and kept the map in front of her face, clipped to a small board, the pencil tethered with a piece of cord so it could not fall into the white and disappear. We descended the ramp cut into the roof with the machines idling low, skis squealing on sections of exposed metal where the snow had blown clear. At the bottom, the world was a salt flat of ice. We tested it with the spud bar. It rang like a cast bell, deep and solid, then went dull over a seam. We skirted the seam and marked it with a small flag for anyone after us. The intake fence stood to our left. Figures stood beyond it, not close, not pressing now. They watched in the sense that their heads were turned to our motion. They did not run. They did not shout. They stood and made no sound I could hear through helmet and wind. We moved north first to avoid the intake zone and then turned west by degrees until the shore was a low line behind us and the plant a shape with edges. The ice sang under us the way big ice does, deep, whale-like notes that rise and fall as temperature changes. Every sound in that first mile felt like a message. It was just physics. The wind cut straight into us and then grew kinder as we found a line between small pressure ridges. We kept our spacing and called out every change. We did not open the throttle fully. It is easy to go too fast on a surface like that. It invites speed and then punishes you for believing it. Behind us, the plant sat silent. The diesel put a small flag of exhaust into the air that broke and flattened. The radio on my chest clicked once as the hourly message repeated. Then the click was behind us, and then it was gone. The first pressure ridge that mattered rose like the teeth of a zipper. The ice on our side was flat. The ridge was 3 feet high at its smallest, 6 at its largest, running like a spine east-west. We cut the engines and walked to the ridge with spud bars. The ice on the far side sounded thinner. We found a trough at the low point and a thicker lip beyond it. We cut a small ramp with the handsaw and shoveled a gentle approach. Then we crossed one machine at a time with Ty standing to the side with the throw bag ready. The first machine hopped over with a snarl from the track. The second got halfway and shuddered as the right ski hung for a second. Liam shifted weight perfectly without being told. The ski found the ramp, and we were over. We took breaks, even though it felt wrong to stop on a lake. We ate with our backs to the wind and drank water warm enough to be worth drinking. We checked fingers and toes for numb spots and stamped feet. We repacked once when a strap loosened. We moved deliberately. The cold works on plans by making you sloppy. We would not let it. At noon, the sky did a thing it does when the air is dry and very cold. It went from an even gray to a hard blue you could measure. Sun off the ice reflected upward and lit our faces from below. I saw Marina smile for the first time in days. "Visibility," she said from inside her mask. "I can see Wisconsin as a line, or I'm making it up. Either way, the air is clear." She took a bearing with the compass and tapped the board. We hold this course for 40 minutes, then check again. In the distance, something moved across our line, low and toward the horizon. It could have been snow pushed by wind, the kind that skates like sand. It could have been people. It was too far. We did not change course because we had no reason to, and because that would have been deciding based on a guess, and we did not guess. The radio crackled once with an open carrier and then a voice so faint I could not make out words. We stopped, dug out the handheld with the larger antenna, and stood in a rough circle to block wind. "Repeat," I said, giving our call sign out of habit. The voice came again. A woman, steady, measured, the kind of voice you hear on boats when things have gone wrong but not yet all the way. "If you are on the ice," she said, "do not approach the inlet structures. Water moves under the ice near them. We have a light at Big Sable Point. We will flash 3 short, 3 long, 3 short every 5 minutes. If you see it, answer with 1 long flare." The radio popped. Silence. "Big Sable," Marina said, her eyes wide in a way that was not fear. "The lighthouse." She pointed north, then adjusted a hair to the west. "Not far as the crow flies. Far enough if the ridges are bad." She looked at me. "We can make it by dusk if nothing goes wrong." She caught herself and crossed out the last words with her hand in the air. "We can make it by dusk if we maintain pace." Ty did not wait for my nod. "We move," he said. "We conserve flares. We keep awareness high. We do not approach other groups unless we have position, and we know we can disengage." We moved. The next miles are a set of images I will keep because they are the ones that make up what I think about when I think the word winter now. The blue of the sky that felt like a roof you could touch. The sound of our machines a steady low band that was almost comfort. Liam's hand when he checked the strap on my pack without being asked. Carla's laugh when the stove lit on the first pump for a cup of hot water like we had gotten away with something. Ty's head turning a fraction left and right, always scanning. Marina's pencil making neat marks on a map that would otherwise be 2 colors and a line labeled lake. We saw the first open lead at mid-afternoon. It was a dark ribbon that looked thin until you were close and then looked like a river. Steam rose from it because the air was colder than the water by a factor you could feel on your eyeballs. We did not cross. We followed the lead north until it narrowed and bridged. Then we tested and crossed one machine at a time with anchors set and lines tight. The lead ran toward shore and toward the horizon, making an S-curve that would be pretty in any other context. As the sun slid toward 4 in the afternoon, the light over the water did a thing I had not seen before from this angle. The top of the sky went greenish, then pale, and a faint aurora began. Not a curtain, but a band, like a high road with small motions. It was not bright, it was a suggestion. It was enough to make us say nothing for a full minute. Then a light to the north blinked 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, steady, careful, a signal you could hold on to like a handrail. "Big Sable Point," Marina said. "That is our confirmation." Ty let the engines idle lower and raised one hand, held it for 3 beats, and dropped it. We advanced. We stopped at a safe distance and loaded the flare launcher. We fired 1 long. The light at the point blinked again, this time faster, then went back to its pattern. We pointed our machines toward the lighthouse and moved until we could hear the creak of the tower in the wind like the old ship it had once been to sailors. Shapes moved at the base, human shapes with structured motion, postures that read as trained even at a distance. We did not sprint the last yards. We kept form and allowed the people at the base to show us how to approach. They raised hands, open, showing empty palms. We did the same. Ty dismounted first, slow and deliberate. A woman stepped forward in a Coast Guard parka with a handheld radio strapped to her chest. "Welcome," she said. No dramatics, no speeches. "We have heat, we ration carefully. We heard your message, come inside." Inside the service building, the air smelled like diesel heaters and wet wool. There were cots and a steel table with a map pinned under plexiglass. There were first aid kits and labeled bins and a line on the wall where someone was marking fuel levels daily. There were faces that did not look surprised to see us, only glad and ready to integrate new elements into a plan. The woman in the parka introduced herself as Chief Petty Officer Ellis. She had a list of questions: where we came from, how many, any injuries, any signs of sickness, how much fuel we had left, whether anyone had followed us. We answered. She nodded and made quick notes. She looked at Liam without any change in tone. "You have done well," she said to him, like an observation, not a pat on the head. He stood taller by a half-inch that only a parent would notice. We ate soup that tasted extraordinary because it was warm, and because someone else had made it, and because the room was safe in a way that let food taste like itself again. We told the chief about the intake noises, the fence, the gate, the careful routine. She told us which groups had made it in from the south and which from the north. She told us there had been lights from the Wisconsin side that were not stars and not boats. She told us that the radio net among stations was thin but real, and that they had kept the light at Big Sable going with a generator that had just enough diesel left for another week if they kept it low. She asked if we had any maintenance skills. I laughed and then apologized for laughing because it was nerves, not humor. "We have a few," I said. Carla's smile was not nerves. She was already looking at the heater in the generator panel the way a carpenter looks at a door frame and sees angles. We slept in a row that night, not because we had to, but because the habit was there, and because you do not spread out when the world is still wobbling under your feet. In the middle of the night, I woke and listened for a tone that was not there, the low, even hum of our plant diesel through the structure. Instead, I heard the lighthouse groan in a slow rhythm and the low conversation of people on watch speaking in a way that said they had learned how to keep voices from carrying without feeling like whispers. In the morning, after a breakfast that involved packets and water heated to the point where steam made the room smell like it had been cleaned, we walked outside. The light blinked. The sky was a hard blue again. The lake looked like a field that would never end. Chief Ellis stood with us and traced a line across the ice with her gloved hand. "There's a group at a marina to the north," she said. "They signal at dusk with a mirror when the sun is low. If you have the fuel and the will, we can make that line together and build a chain. We do not stay in one place forever. We move along the shore when it is safe. We stock, we share skills, and we keep the lights known and predictable." I thought of the whiteboard back at the plant with its neat circles and straight lines. I thought of the gate that wanted to sing, the screen at the intake, the hands under the water that did not feel cold. I thought of the radio message we had left, repeating until it could not. I knew we had made the right choice, and also that I had left a place that had been mine for decades to keep others safe who would never know our names. We spent that day checking the lighthouse equipment with Carla in the lead and me behind with the parts list. We cleaned filters, tightened fittings, and blew dust from panels. Ty walked the perimeter with Chief Ellis's second, comparing notes on watch patterns and entry procedures. They spoke the same language of angles and approach routes and what to do if a door failed. Marina helped the watch write a weather brief that would be useful to people with little training. She used plain words. She wrote numbers large enough to see from across the room. Liam helped everywhere, carrying, holding, asking the right questions and writing down answers like, he knew that memory alone is not a plan. At dusk, from the roof we saw the faint thread of an aurora again. It was brighter this time, and the green along the edge had a pulse. The ice creaked in long, slow notes that felt like engine room sounds from a ship that had not moved in a long time. The light at the point blinked its pattern without fail. Far to the north, a tiny mirror flash answered the last of the sun. We would go there. Not all at once. Not with hope as our only asset. We would go because we had a list and a method, and we would apply them to travel the way we applied them to machines. Before we slept, I wrote a line in my notebook that I had not written since my first year as an apprentice, when everything was new and felt like knowledge you could hold. Procedure is not just safety. Procedure is memory made reliable. I closed the notebook and put it under my pillow like a tool. In the morning, we would fuel carefully. We would pack carefully. We would brief a route. We would set spacing. We would respect open leads and avoid inlet structures, and we would ride. We would ride with the lighthouse at our back and another light ahead, and between the two, we would make a path that others could follow without guessing. We were not running away from the plant. We were extending its boundary to wherever we could carry the habits that had kept us living inside concrete and steel. The lake was our corridor now. The winter that had slowed the infected was our ally and our enemy, the way any force is when it does not care about you. We knew how to work with forces that did not care. That was our profession. When the cold lifted in a few days, the screen at the intake would flex again, the gate seal would groan, and the tunnels would sing whether we were there to hear them or not. If another crew reached the plant, and I believed one would, they would see our notes, run their hands over our foam and brackets, and know where to add their own. They would add fuel records to the wall and new circles and lines to the board. They would run the diesel in auto and listen for the half-second blink and wait for the catch. They would hear the lake in the structure and know what it meant. They would put on their gloves and do the work. We would do ours on the ice. We would keep moving, station to station, from Big Sable Point to Ludington North Breakwater, to whatever harbor still had a roof and a wall and a working hinge. We would cycle the machines, heat one building while another slept, and keep a channel open even if it was only a radio with a repeating message that said "We are here" in a voice that stayed calm. We did not know where the winter would break. We did not know if the lights on the Wisconsin shore would ever become faces we could share coffee with. We knew only that the map had room for lines we could draw if we were careful, and we had a pencil, a rule, and a way of moving that had kept turbines from tearing themselves apart for the better part of a lifetime. We would apply that way to the lake and to ourselves. "Warm your hands," Ty said, and passed Liam a packet heater. "Check your feet, check mine, then get some rest. We step off at 8. Liam nodded and bent to check Ty's laces with the same serious look he had used on a pressure gauge in a corridor a day before. It was the right image to end a day on. A teenager checking a veteran's boots because someone had taught them both that small routines keep large things from failing. The light blinked at the point, steady as a metronome. The wind slid across the roof in a line you could step over without feeling it change. The lake sang. We wrote our route and packed our gear and slept in a row with our radios on the floor between us, all on the same channel. In the morning, we would move. We would do what we had done for a week inside a machine and apply it to a white field without edges. The plan was not new, the setting was. The goal was the same. Keep the system stable long enough for the next shift to take over. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.